Yes.
There she is.
Is
All
Victoria
right.
coming today, Tim?
That we've got NASA visitors from Marshall Space Flight Center headquarters, so she might be locked up with them for a while.
Okay.
The good news is I've been around long enough that I can decide which meetings I go to and which I ignore. And if they
Very
don't
good.
like it, they can throw me out. That's all right. This is one
and
I'm
and
ignoring.
and is Dick joining us? Would Dick be
Oh,
joining us?
I hope so. Dick's always a great contributor, so I hope he joins us. He's
Right.
an intriguing guy. He's done a heck of a lot in spreading Deming's word and a heck of a lot in founding a company and then turning it into a Deming organization, then turning it into an employee-owned company, and then finding somebody like Ian Bradbury to run it while he stepped
Wow.
away. It's a pretty amazing story. So
Yep.
this chapter, Deming again, in his interesting way of trying to shake people up, starts off with reminding us we're living under a tyranny.
That's right.
I always
I
found,
wonder why
And
you said that today.
I, I always found it interesting that he's part of what he wants to do is get executives' attention and move them from where they're stuck into what he thinks is a way better way of doing things. But then he keeps talking about them being tyrants. It doesn't sound like that's a good way to get them involved. But
yeah, I think that was the previous chapter, right? He was showing us the mirror, what we took for granted, and we thought that that's the way it was, a fixture, and then better, you
yeah,
know, better practices, etc., etc. But now he's telling us, what's the basis for those better practices,
yeah.
right?
Where did
And
this come from, and why is
where
this
did
the
this
right
come
way to
from?
do
Yeah.
things?
So I remember when I acquired this book, right? This is the original. Oh my God, I'm just seeing here. This was, you can see how old it is. So,
Yeah.
so
Wow.
30th of, yeah, this is the original.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Likewise. Likewise.
yeah, because now we
Exactly.
have, this is the, by the way, we got this in India, right? So this is the cover here in India. So,
Oh, I haven't
Ah,
seen that cover.
yeah. So, yeah, I remember because when I was over, if you remember, Tim, when we met at the conference, and uh, and then Kevin just asked me. I said, he said, "Is there anything, any help you want from me?" And I said, "These books are not in India." And he couldn't believe it. He said, "What?" I said, "Yes, they're not in India." I said, "We had some publishers who very briefly got the copyrights and sold them for some time, but then we don't have these books here, especially New Economics. Out of the Crisis, maybe,
Yeah.
right?" And then he said, "We need to translate it." I said, "No, English is the lingua franca here. You just need to distribute it." And he was surprised. And so we got hold of a publisher and a distributor. Next thing we know, this book is here. So, yeah, I remember when I got the original and I thought, oh, wow, just 240 pages as compared to, 500 plus of Out of the Crisis. And Out of the Crisis
Yeah.
took me 5 years to understand, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you keep going. But then I realized I was getting used to Deming speak, if I can say that.
Yeah.
And so I thought this book will go faster because it's only 240 pages. And I think it must have been a month and a half when after I started reading it, and then my wife at the dining table asked me, so because I'd made a boastful statement, that I'll finish this book, right? And she said, "So have you finished it?" And I said, I'm ashamed to say this, but I'm stuck at chapter three." And she
That's
said, "Why?" I said, I'm,
that's
I'm, I'm getting nowhere. I'm getting frustrated. She said, "Okay, let's do one thing. Let me start reading the book to you."
wow.
And that's when everything changed. So I still remember we used to And this is just a couple of years after we got married. So, we were all together, and then she used to read out the book to me, and that's when one of his statements about systems thinking became so clear to me, that if you want to improve the system, you need to break yourself out of the system and look at it from the outside.
Yeah.
And when you're in the system, you become the system. So I realized when I was reading the book, I was actually getting into the book. And when now she's reading it out to me, I was suddenly the outsider. And I could
Yeah.
see something which
Wow.
perhaps I couldn't when I was there. So this chapter was, I mean, I remember when she read that out to me, it was like fascinating to just listen to that. So when he says here, okay, in fact, in the preface of the book originally, which he wrote, even the title of the book says industry, government, education. I think he missed the word there, but he wrote it in the preface: industry, government, education, and healthcare.
Yeah.
Right. And I believe that's what he said when he was in Japan. Japan must see itself as a system. And industry, government, education, and healthcare must work together.
Yeah, that's the idea that the system boundary is in your head, and you have to decide what boundary you want to use. And as he
Yeah.
points out, the bigger the system, the more powerful effects it can have, and the harder it is to manage. So you
Yeah.
have to build a system. You might have to adjust your system boundaries in order to accommodate what you can manage. So,
And that's where the aim comes in. What is your
yes,
aim?
yes, I love that. Because I look at everything we do in aerospace, we've got all these rules and regulations, and a whole bunch of them, you struggle to understand the purpose of the rule or regulation. And I said, if I don't know the purpose, the fact that you told me this, I have no idea how to handle things. So you get
Yeah.
So,
help me understand what the purpose is.
so tell me, I mean, I was reflecting on this aim when I was rereading this chapter. And I think of all the organizations I've worked with, nobody had a name. So I'm thinking William Grant's whiskey, Jaguar cars, um, EMC, Motorola. Motorola they did have something called our fundamental objective, total customer satisfaction. But EMC, in fact, I made a note on I was at EMC. Joe Tucci was the head of EMC. They went from it was four guys in a garage that started in the States, and over 10 years they went from, say, 3 software, 5 hardware projects to 20 software and 100 hardware projects of that ilk. And Joe Tucci, when he was there, said, as the CEO said, I can get this to a $20 billion per annum company, but I can't go beyond that. And then Dell bought them out. But and that's not an aim. Getting to $20 billion a year turnover is not
Yeah.
an aim.
It's not
And
a name.
I was reflecting on this. I don't think I've ever worked with any organization that's had a name. They come out with some slick marketing things and some catchphrases, but nobody, I believe, has shared a name that was passed down to everybody. No, not one organization. So for me, that's a fundamental block in trying to get them to think about the system. What is your aim? What are you trying to do? What's not what do you want to do in 5 years' time? Where do you want to be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time? And are you able to adjust to changing customer
Yeah,
needs and requirements? And just when I mentioned 20 years, my understanding is that Toyota Motor Corporation, which is actually Toyota with a D, not a T, they they don't owe any money to any banks. They are completely self-sufficient. That is my
Correct.
understanding. Now,
That
I
is
don't know
correct.
what their aim is, but have either of you? I mean, Tim, what's Rocketdyne's aim? Do you know what it is?
no, and in fact, I'm not sure what NASA's aim is. There's the whole idea, the whole concept of purpose is generally misunderstood. With my NASA connection early on, I was helping somebody at headquarters understand some of what I thought needed doing. When I talked about purpose and aim, she said, "Oh, I got a great idea. I'll send something out to everybody that reports to me. I want them all to write down the purpose of their jobs." And I said, "Slow down. They don't know what their purpose is till you tell them what the purpose of the organization is."
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Mentioning NASA, I gave a conference paper 4 years ago in Norway, and I met Peter Parker, who's the chief statistician at NASA. And he enjoyed my presentation, is very kind. That came up next morning, and he said, "All the problems you've encountered in my career," he said, "I've got the same problems at NASA, i.e., lack of statistical thinking, not statistical methods,
Right.
but statistical thinking connected to systems thinking." And
Yeah.
the two go hand in glove.
Yep.
And the key thing there is the one word that links the two is variation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. I mean, he bounded up the stairs to see me in the next morning, and it was very kind. Anyway, Peter Parker, otherwise known as Spider-Man, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just trying to, read through. Uh, I was trying to understand Apple's aim, Apple, and why did Steve Jobs set up Apple? And he said, I want to make technology personal. I want to make technology, uh, it was the second word he used, and third was easy to use. So personal, productive, right? So he said, I want the technology to be personal, to be productive. By productive, he said, I want people to live better lives because of the technology that the products and whatever I create. And third is they should not struggle to use whatever I give to them. So if you look at all of the products, so they've not restricted themselves to computers right now. I think that change happened with the iPhone when from Apple computers in 2008, they became Apple Incorporated, right? Because it moved away because they had the iPod and then the iPhone. And now, of course, they got into just about everything. So an interesting statement, right? Uh, want to make it personal, want to make it productive and easy to use.
Yes.
So, like
the company I'm most familiar with that used Deming's technique is Dick Steele Speaker Services, and he did a remarkable job. And they have an aim and they pay attention to it, and sometimes they have meetings when they're reaching out. They were overhauling diesel engines, big huge diesel engines for trains, and then they started thinking about maybe big engines that run backup generators and that sort of stuff. And during that time, they examined what their aim was and whether that entering that part of the market would fit their aim. And if it's no, then the question is, do they want to change their aim to include that, or do they want to keep going with the aim they've got? And so they use the aim to help them understand what they're going to do next. And I know they got into the backup generator motors, and they also started talking about getting into carburation to feed the engines. And I don't know where they stand on that now, but they use the aim to help them understand how to focus their attention.
wow.
Okay.
So what are his products now?
The two I know of are overhauling big diesel engines for trains and overhauling big engines for backup generators generating electricity.
So they don't make them, they service them, is it?
Yep, that's right.
Wow. Okay. So I think what could be his aim and purpose? What does he say? How does he state it?
I don't remember. I don't remember for sure. He does talk about he calls it the quality as a business strategy.
Okay.
So they're very focused on quality, and they're very focused. Dick is really big on learning. He thinks Deming's message is all about learning. You need
Oh
to
yeah,
know
it
how to
is.
learn, and you need to continue to learn. And so he's very focused on it. So in his organization, well, it's not his anymore, although he's part of it. In Ian's organization, or it's employee owned, so Ian's running it, but it's employee owned, so the employees are running it. Down on the shop floor, if you have an idea and you want to do a plan, do, study, act cycle to come to a conclusion about whether that's a good idea or not, without having to go through any rigmarole, you can spend, I think the number is $1,500, up to $1,500 to acquire whatever you need to run the plan, do, study, act cycle. So he's got people on the shop floor have the ability to spend company money to forward the company's learning. It's amazing.
Wow. So that's empowerment, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Just,
because I
just
remember that. Yeah, go on, go on.
no, so just think about that company. If they're in the servicing industry, the servicing of big machinery, generators, whatever, as technology changes, will those big generators be there in 20, 30 years' time? So, what is the organization doing to future proof their survival?
I think that was part of what they might have been considering when they were talking about getting into the carburation or the fuel feeding. And I don't know where they are on that. Dick would know, and if he gets on the line. But they are remarkable in the in 2008, when the spit hit the fan and the economy was having lots of trouble, they didn't lose anybody. They didn't have to send anybody home. They got through all of that mess. And that's quite remarkable with an organization that probably had 90 people in it at the time. And with all the stuff that was going around, they managed to get through all that time and come out on the other side in good shape, and they are continuing.
Good.
Yeah, if you see what exactly is service, right? So if you have the categories of what a service is any activity that is carried out on behalf of the customer, right? So like a laundry service, it's not that you cannot iron your own clothes, it's just that they offer to do it for you and you pay them for it. So that's one. Then you have an activity that enhances a consumer experience. So when you go to a restaurant or a hotel or a resort, so they make you feel special. So they carry out activities to do that. And then you have an activity which is carried out to enhance the life of a product. So that's the after sales service. So I think he would slip into that category. He's carrying out some activities to enhance the life of a
Yes,
product. And since generators and what have you, I mean, he's talking about diesel engines, generators. Well, there's always going to be a need for power. Without power, I don't think and any of the technology can run. Finally, it comes down to that. So power is always going to be something that would need to be generated, and captive power even more so if you want to be independent in some way. And that's where the diesel engines and the gensets, etc., come in. And so and they would need constant looking after, enhancement. And I guess that would be his purpose. So he can go beyond that and say that I can enhance the life or performance of any kind of product which comes under under constant usage. Uh, that's how. I mean, of course, we'd have to discuss with him what he has, but that's the aim, right? That's your purpose. You exist for
I
that.
would expect that and I think Dick's still on the board of directors there, but I think Ian Bradbury was probably working. I believe he spends time working on the future and saying, what business do we want to be in 10 years and 20 years? And I don't know if he's come to any specific conclusion. Dick is always worried about any projection you make about where the future is going was is fraught with the problem of how reliable is that prediction. But
Yeah,
that just
but I
means
think
you
I
have
think they have nothing to fear because power is going to be a requirement. It's only going to go up. It's not going to come down.
yeah,
Yeah.
well,
If
and then you have to say, well, it's power, but maybe it's going to be generated by batteries instead of by
right,
mechanics, and so you have to look at things, and you have to be two things. You have to be open-minded and willing to take on a challenge, and you also have to be very flexible and be able to change directions rather quickly when it becomes apparent that where where you thought things were going to go, they aren't going that way, and it may be
yeah,
time for you to change directions.
yeah. I think they could keep doing that because batteries, you're saying, but I don't think batteries. I don't know unless some fascinating technology would come up and say you can have, I mean, I've heard this in theory, antimatter, which
Yeah,
ran the
yeah,
USS Enterprise with Captain Kirk. But
yeah.
otherwise, even if you say batteries, but you need batteries to be continuously recharged, things. And so there's always going to be something, right? And if he's in the power sector, I don't think he's going to run out of any kind of business if you supply to power. Because even now in this AI bubble, which is really is going to explode, I'm saying that very soon because they're investing a lot in AI, but to run the AI systems is back to square one. You're
I
spending
know.
money. It's the same old data centers, the same old servers, and then you need power. And then for power, you have backup power, and Dick Steele comes in. So Dick Steele back.
Well, and if you look at American companies, Dick's done very well. Founded the company in 1971, so it's more than 50 years old
Yeah.
and still
No, that
going
sector would
strong.
never die. That sector itself will never die. So he
But
chose well, but that could be, now he can in retrospect go back and say, okay, let me write down the aim.
yeah, yes. One of the best books I read, especially for people who are not very adept at the moment at systems thinking, is Donella Meadows' book, The System Primer. And
Okay.
she's very good at explaining systems and interactions and all of that stuff. She has a wonderful statement in one of her chapters where she says, we can't understand a system, we can't control a system, but we can learn to dance with it.
Okay.
What
Right.
was her name again, please, Tim?
Yes.
Donella Meadows. She died maybe 5 years ago, but
Meadows.
Okay.
she's brilliant as far as I'm concerned in being able to explain systems in terms. A whole bunch of systems thinking books I read, I end up thinking I should be reading Alfred North Whitehead and philosophy because I understood
Yeah.
that about as well as I understand what they're telling me. But I look at Donella Meadows and it's very simple to understand. A high schooler could understand it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. I've not heard her name before.
Janella Mellows.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
M-E, Donello is probably Donnella. I don't remember. Last name is
Okay.
Meadows, Meadows.
Yeah.
Oh, Meadows. Okay, Meadows.
And the book I liked the most was called The Primer, I think. And I think she's
Okay.
got a website. It's not hers anymore since she's not around. It's a website that I imagine she started.
Yeah, just having quick look on Amazon. There's one
Thinking in
called
systems. Okay.
International Bestseller. And then there's another one, Systems Thinking for Business and Management. And then there's another one with Thinking in Systems, Stop, Expletive, Deleted, Overthinking.
She also talks about the fact that when she was learning and all her friends would get together and all these system thinkers, and she said, we complained about the people we were working with and working for not understanding what was going on, not acting in a way that fit what they had an understanding of. They didn't know how to act on what they understood. And she said, and we complained about that without recognizing we were doing the same things ourselves.
Yeah, yeah,
And I do like Deming's production viewed as a system. And I've used that in the classroom to help people. We go through it and we see what the system looks like. And I've got it on the board. And then after we've done a little bit of work, maybe a half hour into the session, I say, okay, so Deming said he put this on the bulletin board or on the screen when he was working with the Japanese at every meeting. And he said, and they understood this diagram really well. I said, let's see how well we understand it. And so I go around the room and start on one side and say, you guys are the idea generators, and you guys are the designers, and just go around the loop and assign people in the room in different positions. And I said, okay, you all know where you are now. Then I point to something like assembly, and I say, everybody who's downstream of assembly, raise your hand. And some of the hands go up, and I said, look around and see how many hands are up. And people are looking around. I say, do you know that this means we don't understand that figure? No matter where I point, everybody's downstream of everybody else. It's a system. I said, as
yeah,
simple as this looks, you're not grasping what a system is.
yeah,
And I said, and the problem is if you find a symptom that shows up at assembly, you're going to spend all your time and energy studying the hell out of assembly to find out what's wrong. And Bill Bellows used to say, that's like taking your pulse at your wrist and saying, oh my God, my pulse is 180. What the hell's the matter with my wrist? It's a
I,
yeah,
system.
yeah, I remember my first training program with the Indian Railways, and Indian Railways is a massive organization. And unfortunately, I could not make it on time on day one because we had horrible rains and flights were getting canceled and things like that. So I missed the complete day. It was a 3-day program, so I missed the complete day one. And the person who got me over there, he started conducting it for some time. Then he called me up in the evening and he said, Balaji, I'm having a real bad time, and these guys are saying you're not offering anything new. What's Deming saying? We know systems, we know this, we know that. Right. So the next morning I was to speak. And I somehow landed there early. I remember taking the red-eye flight, reaching there at 7 or 8 a.m. And then my session started at 10 a.m. And I walked in, I was introduced, and I began. And then, since he had dealt with systems, I had to deal with variation. So I love to throw data at them. I said, you got to put it in a structured manner. So I threw some data points at them. And I said, could you please write down these data points and could you calculate the average of these data points? And there was utter chaos in the room. All right. And it was more than 20 minutes and we were getting no answers. And I just said, I thought you guys understood a system. And I was just smiling. I said, you guys should have, you could have broken out yourselves up into small groups or done it all together. You take down this, I'll do this, I'll do this. What happened? And there was complete silence. And these were guys in top positions in railways. And I was like 30 plus, 34, 35. And obviously they had that ego problem. How can I learn from a guy like this? But that's where it all began. I said, sorry, I think we need to go back to systems thinking.
And
talking about, yeah, sure.
No, so if I'd been in the room, Balaji, I would have said, and which average would you like me to calculate?
Yeah.
Because I can, there are 5 that come to mind, plus 2 more, and then psychologists developed about another half dozen. So which one would you like me to calculate? So I need an operational definition of average. Because that's the strange thing. If you give a task to somebody and let it absolutely crystal clear, you will get, if there's 3 people, you get 3 different answers.
Yeah. I used to write specifications and discovered that no matter how elegantly and accurately and cleverly and clearly I described something, people found another way to interpret it.
Yeah.
And after they explained to me why they interpreted it that way, it was perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
Tim, you have the book which I gave you guys, the Deming Legacy. You remember I wrote that one section of the development of production viewed as a system?
Remind me.
Sure. Over the years, Dr. Deming kept refining that diagram, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the last one was, of course, what we see in the new economics, where he had it stage 0, the generation of ideas. And I think that's the aim and the purpose.
Yeah.
Because that came later. The aim and the purpose of the system.
That starts to bring in the system includes the future.
Yes. And he also said, I mean, when he started saying things like some things cannot be measured, but they must be managed, the multiplying effects of a happy couple. So I think later on it was Peter Senji who picked on that because he spoke about cause and effect are not closely related in time and space.
Yeah, which makes solving some of these problems rather difficult.
Yeah, and then you have, of course, interdependencies. What does interdependent mean? So it's being mutually dependent and independent simultaneously. And independent does not mean being isolated. Independent means being autonomous. You are different. So you grow by yourself, but to get the job done, you need each other, right? And then you have what are called as synergistic relationships in a system, where 1 + 1 is not equal to 2. It's anything from 3 to infinity, right? And if you take the case that you can never understand a system by breaking it down into its constituents and studying the constituents separately. And a good example you can give is water, 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. So you cannot study water by studying hydrogen and oxygen separately, right? And say that that's what you get.
Not wet, neither is hydrogen, but water is.
Not only that, hydrogen catches fire instantaneously, oxygen feeds fire. but you put them together, you get something that quenches fire.
Yeah.
Now explain. So you could have the same kind of relationships in a company, that the people you can never understand a team or a set of people by breaking them up into separate individuals and studying them separately. It's what they do together which is magic, and not what they're doing separately. That's a system.
And part of the disconnect a whole bunch of us get into is we are told from the time we're young all the way through the time we die that if you've got a complex problem, you break it down into pieces and work on the pieces separately. So, well, you can do that, but you won't learn anything, for Christ's sake.
Yeah,
You need to
I
look at the
always used to get
system.
yeah, I got puzzled because this is written in Claire Abing Lewis's book, where he says, "Mind in the world order." He says, "What's the purpose of analysis?" And we believe the act of analyzing is dissection, and people believe that's the purpose. He said, "No, the purpose of analysis is establishing interrelationships." And uh, the step towards that is, okay, you split it up just to see what the different constituents are, but you have to establish the relationships. And so I find it tautological when people say analytical thinking is wrong. We need to have synthetic thinking. Well, you didn't even understand what the word analysis meant. So you invented another term. There was no need to do that.
Yeah, and I
But
remember working with executives, I discovered that whenever something bad happens and they're chasing down causes and all that, their first claim is the system's broken. And it, it's really hard to get them to grasp the system's perfectly designed to get the results it's getting. It's not
Yes.
broken. The system will produce this again and again and again if we don't change something in the system. And they have a really difficult time of grasping that. They think they've got a Formula One racer, and I tell them you've got a Mercury Villager SUV. I said, it's not a broken Mercury Villager. It's not giving you Formula One results because it's not a Formula One system.
I have a somebody I've known for a long time. He's now written 3 books. He's doing some great. About every 2 weeks, there's a little story on LinkedIn, and name's Dennis Landrum, Lendrem. He works in biopharmaceuticals, and he's talking about relationships and systems within the biopharmaceutical industry. Um, he's a statistician and also a zoologist, I think was his first degree.
Wow.
But he said there's so much waste by people not understanding the interrelationships between factors, the dependencies between factors, and they break it down into little chunks and change one thing at a time instead of simultaneous changing. Now, okay, it's been around since the 20s with Fisher and others, obviously. And George Box went to the States after he left ICI. But when you think about that and interrelationships within the statistical world, and I'm just going to broaden it slightly to the personal interrelationships in the biopharma organization. And it's not just biopharma, that's what he's talking about, that's his subject area. But people are not understanding the interpersonal relationships and their dependencies, which again is driving us back to the system and the team. And in this, one of the key messages out of reading chapter 3, and I just wrote on some bullet points, it's teamwork. And you're all on a with a shared aim, you're cooperating, and one department might lose out to the benefit of the system, but ultimately you're sharing knowledge as well. So as a consequence, and that's the word I've come up with in my own mind in the last 20 years, what are the consequences of doing something And what are the consequences of doing nothing? But there'll always be a consequence. And Dennis has really captured this, and he's got apes in lab coats, gorillas in suits, and it's really superbly well illustrated, and they're all on Amazon. It's Dennis, Dennis Lendrem, Lendrem, and they're paperback books. They're an excellent read. They really are. But he's on LinkedIn, and he's written some white papers and then put them all into a book, and it's really upsetting the apple cart because he's challenging the whole biopharmaceutical industry in the way that they conduct R&D. And then, of course, it can spin over out into other industries, But yeah, it's what I liked in the chapter 3 was about the canteen. They reduced fantastic food and made a loss. I think it was 85 cents a meal or something. But the employees stayed together, so they congregate, they talk, they discuss, they go away happy because they've been fed well. I do know that the Nissan Motor Corporation in the UK, what they had video cameras, and they were videoing and capturing what food was left on the plate from the canteen when they left, and they were weighing the food so they could reduce the food waste, and then decide what the employees liked and didn't like, and then modify the catering system to meet the customer requirements.
Wow.
And it's a very dynamic system. Whereas I also had an interview with ICI, Imperial Chemical Industries, 40 years ago, and the executives had the executive restaurant, and the middle managers had their restaurant, and all the other workers were in a canteen. So there were 3 areas of food, depending on what position you held in the company. And I thought, this is wrong. This is not for me. I couldn't be doing with that. So
Yeah. I I I love the game of football, and I see all kinds of misunderstandings of systems in football. I played with guys who think it's about each one of them doing the best he can. I keep trying to help them explain your job is to make the other guy better. It's to do
yeah,
something that helps us, not to do something that helps you.
yeah,
It's a whole different thing. And I love to see some guy make a 35-yard run through the corner flag, not expecting the ball, but just exposing the space behind so a teammate can run onto it. And I look at things like that and I say, that's why I get really upset that basketball announcers and that soccer announcers, they tell me who scored the winning basket or who scored the winning goal. I said, the basketball game score was 101 to 100. I said, you can't tell me the last 2 points won the game. The system won the game. It was all those interactions. It wasn't that last shot that won the game.
yeah,
But we're stuck in that mental model that the last thing we see caused the
yeah,
victory. I said, no, it's everything that came
Yeah.
before it.
yeah,
It,
yeah,
we are on the verge of soccer now in the United States and Canada and Mexico, right?
Yes.
And if you look at the 2 stars, Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, right?
Yeah.
But there's something common in both of them. It's hard to pick, right? And you have fans of
Yeah.
both and admirers of both. But there's one thing common in both of them, that whenever, even if they are the ones who end up shooting the goal, they always turn around and point to the guy who made the last pass.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You'll always see them do that. It turns around and faces. Have you seen the other guys? They face the crowd and start shouting, but these
Yeah.
two never do that. They never
Yeah.
do that.
Well, I've learned something new because I don't watch football. I gave up in 1970 when I watched the England win the World Cup in '66, and then I watched it in 1970 when England played Brazil. Brazil players were just walking around the football pitch, passing the ball gently, and England were running around and getting nowhere. And I just completely lost interest. But mentioning football, there's a lot of press coverage over here because British citizens are having their visas to enter the state revoked 1 hour before they catch the plane. So, without mentioning any names in America, the that system has changed fundamentally, I think, to the detriment of many individual people worldwide.
Yeah.
I'm very political in trying to phrase that. And I would never have guessed, Tim, that you were a football supporter. Looking at your shirt, I thought, what is that shirt?
Yeah, what's funny, years ago, we used to have casual Fridays, so I'd wear a soccer jersey on casual Fridays. And then I got a lot of time in the company and was feeling like I didn't really need to be casual only on Friday. And I had a lot of jerseys, so I started wearing a different jersey every day. And after a while, it became a branding. They'd say, if you need help, looking at what happened and understanding how to deal with it, go see Tim. And they'd say, who? So, the guy in the soccer jersey. So I kept it up.
You just reminded me when I joined, we were married in '89, left Scotland, went to England, got a job with Jaguar Cars. And I was suited and booted, and I had about 50 different ties. And after a couple of months, I said to one of the senior managers, why does everybody keep looking at my ties walking down the corridor? He said, they're trying to work out which regiment you are in the armed forces, or which private club you belong to in London. And I said, you must be joking. And then I started, when I worked for Motorola, I used to wear customer ties or a supplier's tie. And then the conversation, why are you wearing a customer tie? I said, because we don't exist without our customers. Why are you wearing a supplier tie? I said, well, they don't exist if we don't work with them as a team. But it was a real icebreaker to think, oh, why are you doing that? Stop. Oh, drives me nuts. Drives me nuts.
I like
Yeah.
in this chapter too, when he starts pushing on the destructiveness of competition. And at the end of the chapter, he lists some common examples of cooperation. And what I like about him is most people don't recognize all of the cooperation that happens to make the world go round. We've been taught it's all about competition. So we look for everywhere we look, we see competition because our brain says it's all about competition. And yet, in fact, I think that in the US, the biggest example of how cooperation helped the economy has to do with the railroads and the gauges and the braking systems and all that. In the beginning, with all the different railroads, if they'd have gone about their business all using separate braking systems, separate rail width distances, the economy would not have grown hardly at all. But as soon as they standardized things so you could ship things anywhere you wanted, and you didn't have to worry about unloading them and loading them on another train to get them somewhere else because the gauges or the braking systems didn't match. It's the examples of cooperation and the benefits of cooperation are huge, and we absolutely are blind to them.
Yeah. The standard. In fact, on a lighter note, the basis for the standard, right? The width of the gauge.
Yes.
One of the problems with the railways in the UK is that our standard gauge is different to Europe. So in Europe, it's a wider gauge and they can run faster trains, whereas we can't. We used to have a tilting train,
Yeah.
but then people used to get sick when they were on it. So we and the old 125s, 125-mile-an-hour trains, they could only run at that speed for a very short distance. And the rolling stock's old. I mean, I've stopped traveling on the trains years ago because they can't. They're just not reliable. And the measure of reliability for a train in the UK, when I was well, I did go down to London on the train a lot when I was working in London. If the train arrives plus or minus 10 minutes to the timetable arrival time, it's classed as on time. And they put up monthly bar charts. And Hazel Cannon, we mentioned earlier, she was in Japan and she was going to go from Tokyo to somewhere else. And they said, well, I don't speak Japanese. And they said, well, that's okay. The sign's in English. But she said, how will I know when to get off the train on this train for a journey? And they said, when the train stops at 2 minutes past 11, that's where you get off and somebody will be there to meet you. And they were. You couldn't say that in the UK. It wouldn't work. Would not work.
Yeah. So I think the game that Henry Neve devised, which is here in the book, right? The systems game, effects on area A, B, and C, and
You mean the matrix with the plus and minus?
that's
Yeah. I
right.
really do like
Yeah,
that
that's
a lot.
really nice.
That's an amazing. Yeah, I came up with a game for that when I was taking my program with the Indian Railways. We used to divide there were 20, 25 participants. I used to divide them into groups, and then I said, okay, your area A, B, C, whatever, and then ask them that you're going to be rated based on how well you do as a department. And so they would obviously choose only those projects where they were coming out ahead, right? And then after doing that, then I say, okay, let's put it all together, but I'm going to give you some extra information. And that's exactly what you see at table 2, all right, where the effect on your department was a plus, but actually the other departments are not doing well. So when I started showing them that and saying that the company is lost, so your company is going to shut down, what would you do now? And I would give them a 5-minute kind of time to think, and it would not even be 5 minutes. Within 1 or 2 minutes, they're back and say, why don't we only choose the projects where everyone comes out ahead?
Yeah.
Then I say, okay, and if you want the company
Good
to
luck.
grow, what else can you do? I said, you've only been looking out. And then one of them had said to me, he nudged the guy. He said, hey, there were the other 2 projects where, we were not doing well, but the company's going to do well.
Yeah.
So I guess it's how we judge them that gets them to act in a certain manner.
Sure.
If you say it's only you, so obviously they'll go for, they protect their own turf. And that's why that aim and purpose and where are we headed plays such an important role, especially for systems thinking and for organizations. Yep. I
Yeah,
think this
I remember somebody reminding me that a person will behave rationally given his perception of the situation. So when you put people in a situation where competition reigns, they would be stupid not to act in their own self-interest, which
yeah.
doesn't help the system at all. And so the way you treat the people is certainly going to affect how well the interactions among the departments go.
But do you think one of the on this call this morning, late at night, I guess, in India. We've got three different continents. We've got three different types of culture, maybe more types of culture. But is one common thread that it's the way that we are brought up and educated
Yeah.
within our educational systems, which Deming keeps talking about, that we get grades, you've got to do better. It's all about the individual. It's not really about teamwork, cooperation. And then through university, it permeates again. And then it goes in. I'm not going to say industry, I'm going to say organization, because I think for me, that word covers all different types of companies, organizations, charities, a lot. But it's the way it's built into our mindset from a very, very early age. And that's going to be a hard nut to crack to change that. And it's like we said on week one, it comes back to a really inspirational leader of an organization to break that whole chain of events. But it
Yeah.
ain't
Yeah.
easy.
We're asking people to throw out what they think they know is accurate and true and take on something else. And I think Russ Akoff used to tell us the two of the hardest things for a person to do: one, give up a bad habit; two, initiate a better habit. And we're asking them to do both at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know if you're aware of Henry's course called 12 Days to Deming.
yeah, I am. Yeah,
You are. So in the very first, it's it's an active learning course, he calls it. So he's interspersed the material with pause for thought. Write down your thoughts here. And here's activity. So at the end of day one, where he actually tells the entire Deming story and the whole thing beautifully sort of put together. He said you must have a background, and then he gives an exercise. How imagine yourself in a situation? How would you behave under these circumstances if you were born in Europe? If you were born in a third world country, what would be your thinking? So that exercise, when the participants in the course go through, they come out better people. They say, geez, we never looked at it this way.
yeah, yeah. When I was at Jaguar, I was chosen to be the quality guy, the quality methods guy on the Jaguar S Type, which was a program joint with Ford. So the Ford vehicle was the Lincoln LS6, LS8, and Jaguar it was the S Type. And I said it was the first time they'd had a cross-functional co-located team in a dedicated building on the Design Engineering Center. And I said, and they kept talking about we were the X200 team. And I said, no, we're not a team. We're a group of individuals with different skill sets. We need to reorganize ourselves to work as a team. So we got in some professional psychologists called Sporting Body Mind, who had helped Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. And when Alan Sugar, Amstrad computer guy, bought Tottenham, he got rid of Sporting Body Mind, and Tottenham fell down the Championship League. But anyway, we had this, and there were lots of cliques, because all these guys knew each other, but they didn't know me particularly, uh, with quality and statistics and everything else. And it was interesting that I they were all every senior manager had a team of about 5, 6, 7, 8 people. I was a one-man band, and I said, "You can't." I said, "Quality is all our collective responsibility." I said, "I can be like I can nudge you in the right direction, but you have to do it, and it's quality by design, and we have to think about manufacturing, assembly, supply chain, disassembly, da 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 da." And when we had a first Sporting Body Mind, they all grouped themselves into a circle, and they put me outside the circle, facing away from the group. That was their mindset, that quality is not our job, it's somebody else's. And I was amazed and horrified. Anyway, we did turn things around, and we did. I can't go into all the detail, but it was such a pivotal moment that I thought, they're not getting quality. They're not understanding what needs to be done. Again, changing the system.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
Yeah.
yes. In
Yeah,
fact,
that's why in the yeah,
recognizing that it is a system is problematic even.
yeah, that paragraph where he says, what's management's job? The first
Yes,
step is clarification. Okay, is clarification. Everyone in the organization must understand the aim of the system and how to direct his efforts toward it. But the next sentence is even more important. Everyone must understand the danger and loss to the whole organization from a team that seeks to become a selfish, independent profit center. So both need to be very clear that if we only look at, both the things need to be clarified, right? The aim as well as what happens when we do not have a common aim, right?
Yeah.
And contrary to what people talk about Deming, if you read this again and again, the recommended aim, development of an aim, he was so clear. I think people just didn't care. Boundary of a system, and a system includes competitors. I mean, you just go through this again and again and again, and you say he was so clear in what needed to be done, but we keep saying that he just gave us ideas. So delayed effects and interdependencies and interaction, job descriptions, destruction of a system, and of course then the matrix thing, and that lovely example of who wants to do business with a loser, where she says it saved my marriage. Who wants to be married to a loser? And then cooperation, and of course the 5 reports which he has, the excerpts of those reports in the last bit here. So I think, and then of course the 15 examples of cooperation that he's given here, the time of the day, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
yeah, it's intriguing when we talk about aim and system, and Deming offering that for a man-made system, if there's no aim, it's not a system. When I was teaching school, I discovered very clearly that what we had wasn't a system. And I also discovered something that surprised me. I thought when I was teaching, my job was going to be to lead people to learn certain things. What I discovered is my job was to deliver curriculum. Didn't have anything to do with learning. It's this is what you got to know, and you got to know it now, and we got to do it this way. That was my job. And I said, holy cow.
And tell me, in the American education system, Tim, in high school, does the change of government bring a direct change in education and curriculum? Because that happens quite a lot in the UK. So we need longevity, but it's not always there.
Yeah, the in the US, because it's 50 states, and the rules are that if the Constitution doesn't say the federal government controls it, then the states control it. So every state controls its educational system, and they're all different.
Wow. Wow.
They're all different in the way they do the same thing, which is deliver curriculum, thinking that's going to solve their problems, as opposed to helping people learn.
Yeah.
It's not about learning.
Yeah.
It's about conformity. There are rules
Yeah.
and
There's a
regulations. You got to follow the rules and regulations. You got to do what you're told when you're told to do it. It's all about conformity. It has nothing to do with learning.
that on that point at the Deming Forum conference, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was the head teacher from Matthew Moss High School in Manchester, UK. He was a big Deming thinker and applier. Matthew Moss High School, and he used to speak to the children 11 to 16, 11 to 18. What is it you're interested in? What do you want to learn? And then he would make that happen. So the applicants from parents for their children to attend that very high attaining school were, and in the UK, secondary schools, that's 11 to 18, they have league tables based on various measurement criteria, and he would not send in the data, so the government inspectors would come and they couldn't criticize anything he was doing. He was bucking the system by doing things in a different way. The children, the students were learning, becoming better citizens for the future, and they got very high. They have to pass exams. That's part of what happens. But they were at the top all the time. So I don't know if there's anything written down, maybe in an old conference, but Matthew Moss High School. I don't know what they're doing now, but I do remember that. And the head teacher wasn't available to give the conference presentation, so the deputy head teacher did it. Well, he was happy. He was okay with everything. He just did it. So he delegated, but it was a team delegation again. So
Yeah, I
good stuff.
discovered the school system is really hard to change. It's a you can stretch it like a rubber band, but at any moment it's likely to snap back to exactly what it used to be. It's very difficult. I was surprised at how difficult it was to change. And
Yeah.
I also discovered some ways to accomplish helping kids learn that didn't follow the rules. And the California, you have to have somebody in charge. One of the administrators has to view you in the classroom at least once a year, and make an evaluation on that. And I remember after the third year of teaching, the principal came to me after he'd seen my whatever classroom. I don't know if it was the math or the English class he visited. He called me in and he said, "Listen, I've been visiting your classes for the last 3 years. I know what you're doing is useful and I like it, but it's not what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm not going to come look at your classroom anymore. That way I don't have to report that you're not doing what you're supposed to do." I
Very
said,
good.
"Well, that's fine with me." So at least he had the good sense to recognize learning was taking place and it wasn't going to be valuable to get me to conform to whatever they thought should happen.
Yeah.
But I finally gave up on teaching school. And I tell you, I was a little bit appalled by the fact that I quit teaching school, having a master's in English and a minor in math and the physical sciences, teaching math and English with a master's. And I quit teaching and joined Energy Systems Group of Atomics International, and in 2 years doubled my salary.
Wow.
I'm thinking, you know, it's important what we're doing in those schools. Maybe we ought to be paying them the kinds of salaries we're paying in industry, but
Mhm.
it needs more. It's not just salary. The system is not designed around learning and
No.
fostering learning and fostering curiosity. It's very heavily oriented towards conformance.
It is over here. It's oriented to you. You train your students to pass the end of year exam.
Of course.
And if you don't have if you have continual assessment, it's training them to pass the modular assessments, and if they fail, they can keep on taking it until they pass. It's not about education, it's about passing assessments.
What I was teaching a sophomore English class, so they're, I don't know, 15-year-olds, and the head of the English department came in and said, "Hey, we got this test we're going to give the kids. We give the sophomores every year." And I said, "What kind of a test?" And said, "Well, it's 3 days of testing, and we give it at the early on in the semester, and then you get the results of the test, and that'll help you understand what the kids' weaknesses are and vulnerabilities and strengths. Then you can design what you do around that, and then we'll test them again at the end of the year." And I said, "So we're going to do 6 days of testing?" "Yes." And I said, "And this is going to help me?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." So I explained to the kids what we were going to do the next day. Then they came in and I handed out the tests, and they typically do a sample problem, if you will, to help the kids understand how to take the test. We went through the sample problem, and with a master's in English, I wasn't convinced they had the right answer to that, but I didn't say anything. But then I did read the test, and I read all 3 days worth of tests. And then the second day, when we were supposed to do the second test, I didn't do the test. And the kids said, "What happened to the test?" And I said, "We're not doing the test." And then a few weeks later, the head of the English department comes in and I said, "We didn't get your test results." And I said, "I didn't give the test." He said, "What?" I said, "You told me it was going to help me. It doesn't help me." I said, "I looked at the test and I wasn't even sure a lot of it was right, but I knew I didn't care if a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old knew that. I was going to teach them how to write, and that wasn't going to help." And he said, "Well, you can't do that." I said, "Well, I did." And then the head of curriculum at the high school came in. "So I hear you didn't give the test." And I said, "Yeah, they told me it was going to be useful. It's not." He said, "Well, you really need to give the test." And I said, "No, it's not useful. It's a waste of time." And so then the guy at the district level called me, and after like 3 minutes of conversation, he recognized he wasn't going to make much progress. And he said, "Damn it, Higgins, if you weren't so arrogant, you'd find some use for this test." And I said, "Those are two different issues. I'm arrogant and the test is useless." And the next year they solved their problem. They didn't give me a sophomore English class to teach. So they didn't need to get test results from me because I wasn't teaching any of the kids that were going to have to take the test.
Yeah, yeah. I'm reflecting on something else. I'm not going to say which company, but a company bought another company, and they took the executive board of directors and they gave them a simple test of 10 questions at the start of the morning about quality. That's all I'm going to say. And they scored them. And then they trained all this board of directors through the day in very simple quality techniques. And then they gave them the same test at the end of the day, and they scored them. Now, up until that point, the test scores after the training were always much better than the test scores in the morning before the training, except this one company, they got worse. And I'm not going to say who it was. You can draw your own conclusions. It's just crazy. It really is, I mean, I've worked with quality engineers, and that's their job title, and they didn't know anything about quality.
I know.
The methods, the quality management system, no idea.
No, and they get trapped because their job is to meet all these metrics that somebody's monitoring.
Yeah,
And while they're busy meeting the metrics, the quality of the product's going to hell. It's really ugly.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, the quality control still exists over here, and that's way too late.
Yeah, and 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 the way they handle quality of product is the way they handle quality of the people who work in the organization. You,
Yeah,
you treat everything separately, and you try to make the system better by making the pieces better individually. So it's not going to work, guys.
no,
Doesn't work with the hardware when you try to build it. Making the individual parts quote better doesn't make a better assembly. It's making the individual workers quote better doesn't make a better system of people cooperating. It's very difficult to help people grasp the importance of working on the interactions and interdependencies and not on the individual items themselves. It's about the interactions and the interdependencies.
yeah,
There's way
absolutely.
more leverage in working on the interdependencies because there are more of them than there are individuals. So if you improve all the interactions, that's going to be pretty good if you can manage that. I don't know that you'll improve every one of them, but the more of them you can improve, that's way better leverage than working on the individuals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm just glancing over my notes I made as well, but yeah,
Right. Oh,
Oh, yeah. The other example I like in this chapter is the one Deming talks about in his neighborhood where there are two gas stations
truck.
and
Yes.
they each have a truck and share the truck when they're one and only truck if it's not in use and the other guy's truck is in use and they alternate nights they stay open. A very cooperative situation where they're both way better off than if they competed against each other.
Yeah.
yeah. I guess the only thing that comes to mind over here in the UK in that sort of area is farmers sharing combined harvesters
Yes,
because they are multi-million pound machines and a farmer can't afford to take it on, so they act as a cooperative to make it happen so they can share it around.
Deming mentions the interesting thing too is that new knowledge that gets created in the farming industry gets shared with everybody in the industry, but
Yeah,
new knowledge that's generated in other arenas, technical areas, there's not a lot of sharing going on.
yeah. That's one of the points Dennis Lendrum picks up on. Um, you don't want to share too much of your proprietary knowledge, but there's so many research papers out there which is claiming a benefit, which is fundamentally flawed thinking because they've not thought of the dependencies. Um, so if you get the chance, they're quite an easy read. Apes in Lab Coats is the one to start with, and it's more about human relationships than biopharma R&D, but they're a good read.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The uh, the intriguing thing about how you decide to cooperate, certainly you don't want to give up trade secrets, but there are a whole bunch of common problems that all these organizations have. They can certainly work on those things if they're
Yeah,
willing to, and if
yeah,
they recognize the benefits. Some companies do. There are some companies that do well at that, but the vast majority are see themselves as competing sports teams, evidently, in some kind of league championship.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I think it's important when you are working, let's say within an organization, and if you are doing some R&D and you get a non-significant result, it doesn't show anything, but share it around, share that knowledge so the same mistakes don't happen again. Because somebody somewhere down the line will probably repeat what you've done. But if you didn't share it, they don't know. So they'll find out and waste more time showing that something doesn't work.
That brings up something else in this chapter where Deming talks about monopolies and their obligation to the future because they're in the best position to do that. And Bell Labs, because I can tell you, I read a really good paper from 1925, near when Bell Labs started. And the guy talks about all the research that they were funding and doing. And the research wasn't, you have to design it, you have to do research that's going to help us as a telephone company. It was research for the sake of learning. And it didn't matter what you were doing the research in. And they did that for 50 years. And then we decided that Ma Bell ought to be broken up. And somehow the funding for all of that sort of evaporated. The part of Bell Labs that was left over started getting dedicated to telephones. So by breaking up that monopoly, we lost a whole bunch of funding dedicated to science for the sake of science.
Yeah.
And I don't know that our phones are any better off and our costs are any cheaper, but I know we're losing a lot that we could have had based on their 50 years of being around and what they came up with.
Yeah. 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 We've just lost our landline telephone system because they're going full fiber over here for the internet. And you can have a telephone, but our old contract was £28 a month. And if we wanted to go to a new contract with a telephone, it would be £68 a month.
Oh,
But
man.
if we wanted to go to full fiber to triple the internet speed, £24 a month, but no landline. So we've gone full fiber. We hardly used the phone. We used the mobile phone predominantly. Hardly used the landline. But
Yeah.
it's a strange situation. But there's an issue because we live in the north of Scotland. Mind you, there's another 250 miles in Scotland north of us. You don't get good internet north of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that system is broken. They're going to get rid of landlines, get rid of the old copper telephone cables, but they haven't got a system in place for the population who are aged, who are infirm. We've got a panic button that they wear a necklace with a button that connects
Yeah.
directly to the landline. Because again, if they get rid of the landline, you don't get good mobile phone reception in the north of Scotland either. So they're going for all these changes, but not to the benefit of society.
Yeah.
Short-term thinking again.
That reminds me, you talked about the health. I think the health industry is like the farming industry. They share a whole bunch of stuff. And as a result, healthcare everywhere benefits and people benefit because they're learning from each other.
Yeah, there's a book I remember about American healthcare system using Deming thinking called On the Mend. On the Mend. I can't remember the author's name, but that's a good read.
Yeah.
So even Clay Crawford Mason, the nun and the bureaucrat, along with how hospitals heal themselves.
Yeah, Claire's done a lot of good work over the years, that's for sure.
Yep.
So what else about system? I do also like the fact that in the next chapter he talks about profound knowledge and the fact that you don't have to be an expert in each one of those
Yes.
areas.
Yes.
You just have to.
That's right.
And from a system perspective, it would be great if you recognize a system has interdependencies, and so you need to recognize, appreciate the fact that things are connected and
Correct.
that they interact in a very particular way, interdependency. And that's you don't need to go much deeper into that.
No, no. Well, I'll be redo my homework again for next week.
Righto.
Yeah. What's fun about this is I keep looking each time I read a chapter and say, I wonder if I'm going to see something I haven't seen in the last 30 years.
Yes. Yes.
And I haven't seen it because I just missed it. My brain wasn't ready to notice it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining.
And
Right.
thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your contributions over the years and continued contributions.
It's a shame we don't get some more people joining us, but there we go. We're doing our best.
Well,
Yes.
and the I don't know how many, we don't track how many people go in and look at the recording and may be partaking that way. And it may be quite a few, I don't know. And
yeah.
And I think for my time isn't very expensive, and I would rather be doing this than a whole bunch of other things. So for me, this is great, and I love the insights that come from listening to people who have experienced the world differently. It's just fascinating to me what gets seen, and things that never would have occurred to me. And I said, wow, that's great. Those insights are invaluable, and they don't come without this kind of discussion. I could read the book over and over again, and that would never happen.
No, I'm really enjoying the sessions. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you both, and we'll chat again next week.
Okay, yes. All the best, everybody. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye.